Okay, hello there, and welcome to today's Crystal Interactive Meetings webinar. I'm Rich from the marketing team here at Crystal, and I'm delighted to be joined by my colleague Meeta this morning.
Morning, everyone.
Meeta is the head of our apps team here and manages a team of people that look after all of our event app projects. So a very relevant and suitable person to talk us through this morning's topic. Just a quick bit of housekeeping before we get going. So you'll notice on the screen at the moment there's a reference to Me2, which is an engagement app. And we're going to use that to ask you a couple of polls, and also it's a means for you to ask us some questions, or hopefully not so much for me, but some questions for Meeta. So you can access Me2 via the App Store, so you can download it onto your device. The Apple App Store or Android for the Google Play Store, sorry, for any Android devices. Or if you don't want to download an app, you can use the web browser that you see on your screen there, web.me2.com. When you land on that page, it will ask you for a meeting ID, and today's ID is 177018430. Okay, so the topic that we're going to discuss this morning is the first in a six-part series. And the six-part series is entitled How to Achieve Event App Nirvana, if there is indeed such a thing, Meeta. And the first part, today's topic, is about maximizing adoption of your event app. And before I ask Meeta a couple of questions on the topic and set the scene a little bit, I wanted to ask you a polling question. So if I can ask you to all have your app at the ready, the Me2 app, I'll give you a couple of seconds to get ready. And the question I want to ask is, what was the average adoption rate of event apps in 2016? Was it 40%, 50%, 60%, or 70%? And if you don't know the answer to this, you may have been expecting one of those options to be slightly higher. But I can assure you it was one of these according to the Event Manager blog report of that year. So I can see we've got enough responses in, so I'll close the poll there. Thank you very much. Interesting. Some pessimists joining us this morning, so or maybe some just experienced users who, from your previous use of event apps, that was possibly how many people of your audience had downloaded the app. But the correct answer is 50% from that report in 2016, which is still, I think, a lower number than any of us would hope for the event apps that we produce and manage. We would certainly expect that number to increase when the 2017 report comes out later this year with Event Manager blog. Yeah. And speaking to some of Meeta's team earlier in the week, our kind of average adoption rate so far for 2017 is somewhere between 70 and 80%. So obviously our projects aren't representative of the rest of the market, but certainly year on year we are seeing a rise in the average adoption rates. Okay, so before I ask Meeta some questions and we get into the discussion, it's probably worth setting the scene a bit with app adoption, defining what it is, making sure we're all clear, we're all on the same page. As in the past, it's easily been confused with utilization. Many of the people that we've worked with have easily thought they're one and the same thing, but they are very different. So adoption is the number of people that have downloaded and accessed the app, whereas utilization is the measurement of the app usage, so how it's being used. And it's really, really crucial that both of these things are working together, that you have high levels of both, because there's no point in having an app that everyone can download, no point in having high adoption levels unless it can be used in the right way that's a benefit to your attendees and to you as the organizer. And likewise, there's no point in putting all the time and effort into building a really great app that's going to be used really well unless it's really simple and clear for your attendees to access it in the first instance. So today we're going to be looking at adoption. The next webinar in this series will look at utilization. We will touch on it throughout the discussion, but primarily today, we're going to look at adoption of event apps. Okay, so Meeta, you and your team manage lots of different kind of projects, event app projects, different sizes for different types of organizations, internal events, external events. But are there kind of a standard set of questions that you would typically ask all of the clients, regardless of the type of app?
Absolutely. I think one of the key questions that we ask at the beginning of the process is what modules or features that the client wants to include in the app. So event organisers know their audience really well, they know what the event's about and what they're trying to achieve. So they will instinctively know what some of those features are. They'll kind of know what delegates will expect to find in the app and how they expect to use it. So some features like the agenda and the speaker list and things like that, you know, they're really quite popular because that's what kind of people expect in an app.
Yeah.
Others, they kind of want to do something in the app and they're not quite sure of how to achieve it. And so we can help clients kind of use a feature in a way that achieves that objective as well. I mean, the key thing though is you want your delegates to use the app, so give them reasons to do that.
Okay, so it's really about thinking at the outset of the project how the app can align with objectives.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, and once you've done that, at what point do you start to think, obviously you're starting to think about the build timeline and the structure, but at what point do you start to think about the promotion of the app and the kind of messages that you'll send to get people to download it?
Yeah, so I think it's really important to have an overall kind of timeline or schedule for the app. And if we kind of work backwards from your event date, so you've got your live event. I think the next kind of date we kind of need to identify is when clients want to launch the app.
Okay.
Now that can be kind of 1 week prior, or it can be 3 weeks prior, it can be 4 weeks prior. It very much, again, depends on the audience and the type of event it is.
Yeah.
Once we've got the app launch date identified and agreed, that then gives us the key date for the app build, which is when we need to kind of submit that app to Apple and Google for approval. Once we submit the app for approval, it's in their hands, and that approval process can take anything up to 3 weeks.
And is it the same for Apple as it is for Google
Google
Play?
takes slightly longer, but they tend to be be available in stores around the same time.
Okay.
And you know, we say anything up to 3 weeks. Sometimes it is faster, but it's in their hands, so it's a non-negotiable kind of deadline, that one. So once you've kind of got your app submission date, that's the kind of date you're working towards to get your app built. Now that kind of frightens some people because they think they've got to have everything done by that date, but actually there's only 2 or 3 key elements you need. So once you've kind of got your objectives defined, the next step then in the process is to provide us with all of your branding. Once we've got your branding and we know what modules you want to use, we'll provide you with some mock-ups. Now, a mock-up is a visual of what your app will look like, and it has the branding in place. It has all the modules
like a
in
little
place.
test app.
It's actually just a visual at this stage, and once the visual's kind of been signed off, we then go into the beta build, which is the test app. And at that point, the client can actually see it on a device and will know what it looks like. And then we do the initial content upload. Now, that content, I mean, we all know working in events that we're never going to get final content 4 weeks prior to an event. We'll be lucky if we do.
I'm sure everyone who's joined us this morning will be nodding their heads.
So in reality, the actual, a lot of the content comes to us like maybe 1 or 2 weeks prior the launch date, and some of it coming up to the live event as well. So that initial content upload typically is test data. Okay. So we can launch, we can submit to stores once we've got the branding and the modules in place. We can submit to stores with test data. What that allows us to do is kind of separate out the promotion plan, and it allows us. It's like 2 work streams. So you've got one work stream which is about the app build, and the second work stream which is about how you promote it and at what points do you go live with different pieces of content.
Okay, so you're basically treating it as, like you say, as 2 separate work streams, which presumably enables better focus, so that you've got, I mean, some of our clients will probably have resources internally to to give someone the project to just manage the build of an app, and then someone else can just focus on the promotion. But presumably, like I think you hinted at there needs to be some link between the two.
There does need to be a link. They kind of work alongside each other, but it's important to kind of have the links. And so, for example, when we submit the app to stores, you might want to send out communication at that point to sort of warn your attendees that, you know, yes, there is an app that's going to be used for the event. This is how we might be using it. Watch out for it, because so that's just quite nice. Plant the seed, give a little teaser. You know, tell them about the exciting things that the app might be doing.
But you wouldn't necessarily have the download instructions at that point.
Not at that point, no.
Okay, just give them a heads up that we're going to be using an app. More details to follow at some point.
Exactly that.
Okay.
Then when you launch the app, that's when you might want to give the download details.
Okay.
And what do you launch with? Well, launch with content that you think, you know, your delegates will find useful. So quite often clients will launch with an agenda, maybe a city guide, you know, venue info, things like that, because you will always get a handful of delegates who are really keen, who want to know where they're going, what time they need to be there, what the city that the event is has to offer, so they can plan what they're going to do in their downtime, if there is any. So you always get a handful of delegates who will download the app early, but I think it's also important in that promotion plan to then also think about further touch points where delegates have that opportunity to download as well.
It's probably best to assume that the vast majority of people won't download the app after that first message, right? No. So it's about kind of drip feeding those messages in as we get closer to launch. And certainly I know from some of the work that I've done with a couple of clients that if you can drip feed in these announcements with content updates, so again you can reaffirm the message, give people another reason to download the app. It might be that the speaker list has been announced, or if it's a multi-stream event, you might upload their personalised agendas maybe a week before.
And if you're adding an element of gamification, you might want to kind of launch that ahead of the live event as well, to get people kind of started.
Okay. So this is very much about pre-event and just thinking in a quite structured way about how we go about building in conjunction with promoting the app and doing as much as we can to the lead up on the day. But what can we do once we are at the event, once we're on site? Because we can plan that pre-event process as much as possible until we're blue in the face, but there are always going to be people that turn up and they still haven't got the app. So what can we do to combat that on site when people arrive and they're not aware that there's an app?
Yeah, I think there's a number of strategies you can use on site to increase uptake. The first is ensure all of your registration staff are encouraging people to use the app. So when your delegates arrive and they pick up the badge, it's a simple question: have you downloaded the app? And if they haven't, get your registration staff to point them in the direction of an app help desk. So that's the second point: have an app help desk.
Okay.
And how you staff that help desk is, I think, quite important. Some clients might think it's an app help desk, therefore you need someone quite technical on the desk. I don't necessarily think that's the right way to approach it. Yes, the person's got to be quite tech savvy. They need to know how to use a smartphone or smart devices. But the key thing is they have to be approachable and they have to be friendly. They need to be able to talk to delegates in a non-technical way and explain things quite simply. Because sometimes the issue, they haven't downloaded it, maybe because they haven't had time or whatever, but sometimes the issue isn't with the app, it's the fact that they've got the wrong settings, or they just need to get onto the Wi-Fi. So you're actually talking them through the whole kind of process.
I think, certainly it's often more a case of it's something to do with their device settings, or they've forgotten their Apple ID, and like you say, Wi-Fi is still certainly the biggest single point of failure with event apps for a lot of the projects that we work on.
Yeah.
And just on Wi-Fi, we'll touch on it in webinars to come, but although it's ultimately often out of our control, there are things we can do to mitigate the risk.
Yeah, there is. I mean, I think, check that your venue has great Wi-Fi and check what the connection process is as well. Because sometimes you get on site and you connect to the venue Wi-Fi and you kind of get a page, you've got to fill in loads of details. We call that a captive portal, by the way. And once you've kind of filled in those details, you then kind of get onto the Wi-Fi. Then maybe you haven't used it for, the app for a bit, or you've been doing other things for the past hour, and then you go back to it, and you've got to kind of fill those details in again. So it's all very well kind of going through that process, but I think the key thing to check is once your delegates connect to any Wi-Fi, it's really important that they stay connected for the duration of the event, because if they have to keep going through this connection procedure, it's really frustrating.
I think we've all stayed in hotels where we've only had an hour or two connection and before it disappears, and it is incredibly frustrating, especially when you need to use it for something specific like an event, if you're doing polling or any kind of interactive features.
Yeah, exactly that. And better still, you might want to even get a dedicated network for your events as well. And then once you've kind of caught those sort of people who haven't quite downloaded the app before they've got on site, I think the next strategy you could probably, which is quite easy to do as well, is just have an introduction to the app during the start of the plenary session. So maybe as part of housekeeping. I think it's really important to say why you're using the app, how it's going to be used, and maybe just do a really quick, fun icebreaker question to actually get people using the app. Because what that does is it means that you're quite serious about the app, and people have got something fun to play with before you actually start using it in anger for real kind of business-related questions.
So that kind of icebreaker doesn't need to be business-related.
No,
something completely off the wall, or something about the venue that the event's being held at, so an interesting fact of some kind, but just to get them using the technology before they need to use it for the purpose that it's there.
Exactly.
Okay. And to put you on the spot slightly, we've had a few interesting projects over the summer with event apps. Are there a couple that spring to mind that have done anything particularly creative or interesting to drive adoption to their apps?
Yeah, there's two examples that spring to mind. The first one is we did an app for Gamescom, which is a large exhibition for gamers, which is held in Europe, and there's thousands of people that attend. And we used the app there. The app had a queue busting code. So you can imagine there's loads of people at an exhibition. The exhibition's got a number of different kind of seminar sessions, if you like. Queues to get into the most popular ones. You kind of there, you want to see everything. You get to the one, the session you want to go to, you're at the back of your queue, use your queue busting code, and you're immediately at the front of that queue.
I imagine that kind of thing appealed quite heavily to us Brits who
it did, it
despise a queue, so
it did, and the download on that particular event was over 2,000 downloads we had of that app.
Okay, and that's a really nice tangible benefit for the app. It's something that people can easily see the benefit for, whereas other features or other implementation methods, maybe you can't quite see the benefit, but that obviously was immediately
absolutely an immediate sort of benefit for the person attending, and a reason for them to download the app and use it. Another more corporate example is we did a leadership event with a large consumer goods company, and their internal events team were real advocates of the app. So the app had in there the agenda. It was a personalised agenda, so it kind of told delegates where to go for certain sessions. And if a delegate was to kind of go up to the event staff and say, right, I'm really not sure where I'm supposed to be for this session, the event staff would say, well, okay, let's have a look in your app, let's see where you're going, and they would kind of help them use the app to find their place. That slightly might not work with some events because that was an internal event kind of,
so they could be a bit more pushy with the audience.
Exactly that, so they could be a bit more pushy and say, right, you have to use the app.
Okay.
And they were really brave. They had, they hadn't published the information in any other way than through the app. So that was another reason to use the app as well.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, so we've had a few questions that have come in, which we'll address in just a second. But to kind of summarise those points, we've got 5 top tips for increasing event app adoption. So just to kind of recap some of the things that you've just said. firstly, you mentioned about making sure the objectives are aligned with what the app is going to do.
Yes, absolutely. So give your delegates a reason to use the app and make sure that's aligned with the objectives.
And linking back to that, I imagine, as the project kind of progresses, just linking back and kind of giving yourself a sense check that what we're doing here is relating back to those objectives.
Exactly that, yeah.
Secondly, the delegate experience.
Yeah, so this is what we talked about, making it as easy to, making the delegate experience really easy. So they need to be, downloading the app, the experience that they have on site. And, another idea you might have is, you might want to kind of use is if a delegate's arrive and their phone is about to die or something like that, you might want to have charging stations at your event, or even spare devices that the delegates can use. So you kind of want to break down all the barriers to adoption as possible.
Okay, because I guess there are still people that are maybe using BlackBerries as their primary device, or they might have a strange iteration of an Android device that they perhaps can't download it on. So a backup device of some kind.
Exactly.
You mentioned this.
Yes, so this was the example I talked about earlier. Get your stakeholders as involved early and get them to be real ambassadors so they can kind of enforce the use of the app.
Again, creating a structured app promotion plan, which we covered with that timeline, which links in with the final point about ensuring you've got this structured build process. So these 2 points, separate but linked by nature because they're kind of going on at the same time, and just ensuring that they are linked in that you're thinking about both, but perhaps, as we said, some clients possibly have their own resources to manage those individually in isolation, but others won't and might look to someone like us to manage it all for them.
Yeah, exactly that. And if you've got that plan and timeline in place, it kind of gives you a good you can kind of check things off and make sure you've kind of done everything that's going to kind of really give users a really good experience of the app on site.
Great. Okay, so those are the kind of the 5 top tips for event app adoption, to maximize event app adoption, and I'm sure many of you will be doing all of these, some of these already, but if you're not, they're really easy, practical things to try on your next project. Some of you may have resources to manage all of these internally, others may not, and it might be, like I said, that you need a provider to manage some or all of these for you. Okay, so let's look at some questions that have come in. So firstly, is there one killer tactic that can increase adoption within an audience that might be less inclined to engage?
I think the GamesCon example is really good for that one, actually. So if you kind of know the audience, what's the one thing that is in the app and nowhere else that will get them to download it?
And that's probably solving the biggest pain point that the attendees will have at the event. Queue times. They're there for a reason. They want to go and see the latest gadgets and games, and the thing that's stopping them from doing that is a massive queue. So
exactly. Or maybe there's some sort of giveaway or some piece of content that's really important, and make that available in the app only, and I think that will get people to download the app.
Great, thank you. Okay, Dawn Smith says, if you don't know who's going to be attending a meeting, what tips do you have to get people to download it when they arrive?
I think the registration people sort of encourage them to do it early when they arrive rather than when they're all in plenary. So I mean, I think if you know a lot of your delegates aren't going to have download the app before they arrive on site, and that's a given, I think you plan for it. So I think that's when it becomes important to have spare devices on site which have already got the app on it. Get your event staff all engaged and encouraging people to download it before people walk into plenary. Have the signposted app help desk as well. Have charging stations for people's own devices in case they start running out of battery.
I think I'd add to that I think it depends what kind of app you're using as well. If it's something that's could be web-based, like Meeta, the engagement app that we're using for Q&A and polling at the moment, then people don't have to download that from the App Store. So you could put messages around the venue, posters, have QR codes, or if it's a downloadable app, a QR code. But like we have done for the slides that we've put together, having the meeting ID and the kind of the access codes available as people walk into the room. And then, like you mentioned earlier, the presenters, the people that are hosting the meeting, to reference it as well is probably the biggest impact to get people on. Just another question there. Do you provide your clients with reports on the success of the app, adoption, utilization, etc.?
Yes, we certainly do. So this is something that all of our clients get post-event. They get all of the stats around the event app, everything from adoption to what features have been used and to what extent. Yeah, and it's a funny one, Terry. Thanks for your question, because a couple of years ago, a lot of our clients would just ask for the adoption rate as a statistic that they wanted to go back to their stakeholders with after the event, because they thought that was the biggest indicator of success. But actually, the adoption rate is fairly meaningless unless it's compared with the utilization rate. So the short answer is yes, we do provide all of that information post-event. But it's important to read the stats together, the adoption and the utilization. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I think that's all of the questions that have come in. So we'll leave the question feed open for a bit longer in case there are any other questions that come in. But before we sign off, I would like to ask you just a quick evaluation question, please, which is, how useful did you find today's webinar? So if I can ask you to open up your Meeta app, or go back to your web browser. And this is a really, really important question for us, for Meeta and I. And maybe think about, was the session too long or too short? Was there enough information? Not enough? A few more seconds, and I'll close it there. And that data is just for us, but thank you very much for your responses. Okay, so just a couple of things before we leave. The next webinar will be at some point during October, a date to be confirmed. But part 2 of the Event App Nirvana series will be about maximising utilisation of the app. So in conjunction with adoption, how we can get people to use it properly once they've got it on their device. And then secondly, we run a series of masterclass events in and around London every year. And our next one is on Tuesday, October the 24th at Etc. venues in Victoria, London. So if that sounds of interest to any of you that are UK based or in and around London and you'd like to come along, you can drop me an email with the details on the registration link for GoToWebinar, and I'll send you more information once that's confirmed. But all that's left to say is thank you very much. We'll see you soon. Thanks everyone. Bye.